moderator. No, the thing I wanted to do actually with this group is also because I think journalism is about telling stories, and it's actually an interesting intersection where it's facilitating a public discussion that also you guys are just as interesting and have as many wonderful things to say. So we've got a Twitter wall with the hashtag OKCon DJ, which stands for data journalism. So you can use that hashtag if you've got questions, if you've got things you want the panelists to address. They're keeping it nice, short, and sweet, as good journalists do. And then we'll have a chance for them to respond to each other and talk with everyone in this room. And yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing about data journalism. What's next? So first off, we have Mirko, who's got a big framing question for us. Right? Did you want to go? You had the... No. Yeah, sorry. Just kidding? Yeah.
So, I only have 3 charts for this session because it's probably some of you saw I have like a full-blown presentation afterwards. And I simply wanted to address that very question that's looming on this session, like what's next. And I would like just to briefly share what I think is happening right now. We've seen much progress in the last few years, a lot of examples of journalists putting data to good use. Just recently, OWNI won several awards with a nice piece about telephone data done by some people from Romania. So the field is widening. It's getting better. But still, at the same time, I'm a trainer for journalists, together with my colleagues from Deutsche Welle, and we've seen like 60, 80 younger and older journalists from Germany looking for multimedia journalism, data journalism. And what they're saying is, if we come up with all these examples from the web, first of all, not everybody knows that. And secondly, they say, that's from another world. That's not our world back in Göttingen, in Munich, and wherever. I can't speak for everywhere in the world, but what I'm hearing from colleagues in Africa, and so it's changed in media and getting somewhere else is hard. And I'm really working hard at this moment to get everybody on the same page as a trainer, trying to synthesize and prepare the employers for the future employees that will be talking about different things. But it's slow, and that's why I'm claiming that Simon Rogers is a big outlier. I'm watching what you do, and we're pretty amazed at how the Guardian is moving. And we've seen in South by Southwest, the Guardian is there. Guardian is becoming kind of global brand for a newspaper, which has been a printed newspaper like 5, 6, 10 years ago. I mean, you've been really active on the web, but I think that's where we can see how this changed actually, moving our institutions and whatever it is, the companies we're working for, the communities we're working for, and it has an effect. And that's why I think it's really important. I think, and that's what I'm working on together with my direct colleagues, we are now preparing a 1-week data journalism training in Germany. Even that is not that easy. We're trying to get it, it will be like trying it out, whether we can get the message across and people will walk away being happy about working with data. So we see about that. And then the last thing for me is we need to somehow, as this is moving to higher and higher levels in being viewed as something important, open data journalism, we need to define and kind of discuss and argue and debate what might be the long-term goals. How do we apply the energy that is here in the room, that is out there, to better use so that we get projects done and not things blocked by whatever barriers are there. And I kind of try to lighten up the whole thing. That's what I said. And my question, and then I'm done, what would be data-driven journalism, the movie? Like, where are the plot points ahead? Okay, thank you very much.
movie, data journalism. We'll be here for the premiere. All right, so next up we have, now we're actually following the order. We have Simon the Outlier.
Okay.
Sorry, is this coming as a surprise to everyone? No.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just really impressed by Mirko's swift presentation. I'll try and get through. So, I was asked to talk about the future of data journalism and kind of where we're going to go next. And often what I do when I go and do these talks is talk about data journalism is really cool and you should all do it. And actually, this is nice to be in a place where everybody already kind of believes that. So, let's plug in. This will work. So, for anybody who doesn't know what I do, I guess I edit something called the Guardian's Datablog and Data Store. And what we do is every day we publish raw data and stuff behind the news. So every day there's a story. Somewhere there'll be a story that'll have some data in it, unlike my laptop. I suppose the first thing I was going to say was really how this isn't unusual anymore. It's just very much kind of part of what we do now. I sit in the newsroom at work. I'm involved in a lot of the news kind of discussions we have around the issues of the day and what's going on. Okay. Hey, there we go. Okay. Is that showing up? Kind of there, brilliant. And it's very much kind of a part of the process now in terms of what we do every day is data journalism. Because really it's starting to become the norm. It's starting to become something that's not unusual and not weird and different. And that's kind of what it should be. It's just really another tool. Something like, 10 years ago, can you imagine not using the internet for our work? Yeah? I mean, when I started work, I was the only person in the office to have a computer, and I got a computer because I was the youngest person there. Okay, let's see if we can get this working. And, can we see that? Great. Okay, so I got the computer because I was the youngest person in the office. And I got one of those Amstrad green screen ones, I don't remember those word processors. And we'd type up stories, then print them out and give them to the sub, who would then cut out bits of paper and stick them on pieces of paper. And that's 1991, so lots have kind of changed since then. The other thing I was going to say, I'm going to do 10 rules while whizzing through this. 10 things I think are trends that I think are happening in data journalism. Firstly, it's about curation. Now it's about there's so much data out there, nobody knows where to start. And I think this is just not behaving, is it? The trend in the future will be about where's the best place to go. And if you look at, if you start typing in data searches in Google, you're going to be completely screwed. So it's really about how do we compare to all these people, all these other kind of data sources that are out there. And the other thing I was going to say about this area is that now it's kind of accepted that we should receive data in decent formats, from government. We should get data as spreadsheets. We should kind of know where we are, and that's a big change. But what we find is we still have to go into PDF, still have to excise stuff. I spent most of my flight mucking around with the Office of National Statistics report today on populations. There's a fantastic report out today which has got populations for every bit of the UK, and you can see how they've changed. And you can get some of the old reports, you can see how they've changed over a longer period of time. You can see where you've got more retired people than younger working population and so on. But that stuff's a nightmare to go through because the Office of National Statistics in the UK still thinks it's publishing books of data, how it used to do, and it has this ridiculous publication schedule. Their spreadsheets are full of kind of blank lines and overform and yada yada. It's just a complete mess. So we still spend a lot of our time mucking around with that, these kind of basics with data. But I really feel that's going to change. Secondly, I think news organisations are increasingly becoming data providers. That's certainly we are now. We've got a couple of data searches out there. We do this thing where we scrape world government data, which is the one on the left, and it's not. We do the scrape for ourselves. We're not dogmatic about it. We might even take on the one that's been launched today. But it's just we think that you need one place to go where people can find all this stuff because there are so many sources. And I think if I was to guess what will happen, I think that the source of data will become more and more joined together, and I think there'll be fewer places where people can go to get more and more stuff. Trend number 3, I think what we're increasingly seeing are huge, big data sets that are about smaller things. So this particular one here is from the Indices Multiple Deprivation, which is a really, really detailed study in England. It splits up England into 33,000 areas. Each one is like about 10,000 people. So you get really, really detailed, very, very local data. Big data about small things. We're increasingly seeing data sets like this. Things like coins. Next week, I think we have the whole government accounts coming out sometime before summer, which is the kind of the son of coins. It's basically, I don't really know what coins is. It's this treasury database of kind of everything that's spent in the UK. And that's coming out soon. That'll be an enormous data set, millions of data points. And our job will then be kind of how do we compress that down, get the stuff out that we want to get, and make it easier for people to understand. Term number 4, that the quality of free visualization tools has changed. It was the most influential graphic on the internet a few years ago, and now we can do stuff like this. So, you know, very easily, this is Tableau, but you've got Google Fusion tables, which I'm kind of obsessed with at the moment, really powerful mapping tools, which anybody can use, and you know, you don't have to be a statistical academic to work out what to do with them, and that's a new trend which again kind of democratizes this whole process. It means that in the past, you know, it was all about us as journalists giving you the information. Now it's much more of a kind of two-way process. Fifth thing I would say is that design really, really matters. I think there was a trend recently, recently in the last kind of year or so, where you have people who are doing their own design and doing their own data analysis, and I think actually there is a skill there in designing data properly, and it's kind of, yeah, it's decided, of course we could all do everything. You know, I could sit there designing a graphic, but it won't be as good as getting a designer involved. And I think in the past it was all about just getting the data out there and visualizing it in much the same way as it's kind of, it's interesting to see a dog walking on 2 legs. It doesn't do it particularly well, and I kind of think if I was designing a graphic, I wouldn't do it particularly well, but it'd be okay. But having a designer involved in something like this is, we had data out last week, which was a list of everybody who works at the top of the civil service in the UK, all the mandarins, you know, who kind of run our lives. And it was a right old mess, so making some sense of that, and this splits it up into departments. I see the biggest one down here is the Ministry of Defence, which doesn't have the biggest budget, but it does have the most civil servants. And it's remarkably inefficient. Everybody knows it's inefficient, so it kind of reflects that. The other thing is that thing I was just saying, really, that increasingly we're starting to realise that it's not about us telling you anymore. It used to be we sat in our ivory towers, I'm soaking me under that. We sat in our ivory towers, threw information out into the world, and you all kind of gratefully received it. For hundreds of years people did that, and now, whereas out there are people who know loads more about things than we do, and involving them in the process is really, really important, and it's what gives us an edge, and you know, we're trying to do that as much as possible. This is controversial. I think crowdsourcing is great, but it's never, I don't think it produces data, and certainly hasn't in our experience. This is our MP's crowdsourcing exercise where we crowdsourced, you know, 458,000 documents. We had, you know, 25,000 odd people going. One particular person did 30,000 documents, one person. Now, besides the fact they know more about MP's expenses than our entire Westminster team put together, they, we just couldn't rely on the data we got back. Now, there are some exercises that are going on out there. The National Maritime Museum, I think, is crowdsourcing maritime records, you know, from ships' logs, from naval logs. And the way they're doing it is they're getting 10 people to do each one. But we haven't successfully done that. Crowdsourcing has worked very well for us in terms of generating stories and helping involve people in the story. We did it with Sarah Palin emails a couple of weeks ago. We got people to go through them for us because, you know, you've got 20,000 odd documents. How can we do that ourselves on our own? And as an involving process, works really well. But we haven't successfully generated data out of crowdsourcing yet. I think increasingly we're going to see victims of data, which is great stories for us, unless of course we become a victim of data. So, you know, Bank of America has had to hire 20 lawyers just to look out for stuff that might be released by WikiLeaks. You know, these are kind of things that cost money out there in the real world. Also means that you know, nobody is safe. Big companies aren't safe, which is great for stories, but also means, yeah, we're a big company, so perhaps we're not safe in the future. This is, I think it's really interesting how really savvy companies are starting to use data as part of their process now. So something like LinkedIn has several data scientists, and they monitor everything about us, all our profiles and everything. I don't know, is anybody, in 2008, the go-to term, people describe themselves as gurus, you know, data guru or a tech guru, and then 2010 they're all ninjas, and now they're Jedis. Any Jedis in here? Very quiet. Okay, well, I don't believe, I'm sure there are some Jedis in here. And, but, you know, the whole operation is based around data. And increasingly, you know, news organisations, every organisation will have to all these people who are collecting data and collecting information have that stuff there, just don't know how to use it. And the people who win out will be the people who kind of do know how to use it. And last thing is that data journalism is traditionally associated with creating pretty pictures and images. And whilst it's true that visualizing data can help tell a story brilliantly, it's not just about that. And often a lot of the stuff that we generate at work is just about generating a story. It's about using that data to tell a story. It's just another source. Traditionally journalists would sit in pubs with sources and get stories. And now, the same journalist might slave over a hot spreadsheet until they can drag a story out of it. The theory is the same. What you're trying to produce at the end is telling stories and producing things with data that people used to just do with words. And one of the examples I often use when I'm doing these talks is the very first Guardian in May 1821 had a giant spreadsheet on the back page, which is a list of every school in Manchester and how much it cost and how many pupils went there. That was the very first one in 1821. And the person who leaked that data, leaked data to us, did so because effectively they said, without knowing what's going on in the world, how can we make it any better? And data can do that. Data can help us work out what's going wrong and what's going right in the world. It can also help us tell stories. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the top 10 list. Next up we have Stefan. I hope your slides are also good to go.
Where can I get that movie picture? The poster.
It's Creative Commons. I have to check for the right picture. It should be okay.
Yeah, you got a lot of love that you were using a digger for the picture.
Yeah, the comments in detail.
Okay, hi, I'm Stefan Candea. I'm from the Romanian Center for Investigative Journalism. It's a media NGO that I co-founded with 3 colleagues of mine in 2001. And I'm just finishing a fellowship for journalists, the Nieman Fellowship at Harvard. So I will talk about data journalism from my perspective as an investigative journalist, and my work and my colleagues' work was almost always focused on organized crime in Eastern Europe. We were forced to sorry, how to make this work?
Yeah, Windows.
Yep, exactly. So what's that? The arrow doesn't work.
There.
So we were forced out of the mainstream media in Romania because our work was misused, and it was misused by different structures of power to make money, not out of journalists, but out of advertisement racketeering, blackmailing, and stuff like that. So because we were forced to get out of the mainstream media, we started to do a lot of experimental work with gathering of information, packaging this information, and publishing it. So to reply at what's next, I want to go a bit back into our work in the last years. And when I started in '99 in my newsroom. There were more typewriters than computers, and journalists in the investigative department, for example, were sharing. 14 journalists were sharing 2 computers, and almost nobody of my colleagues was using documents that he was getting directly, requesting those documents. Nobody was using databases. So it was first when we started to use, for example, a database for company ownership. And little by little, the media has changed, at least in my region, in this way, using a network of resources instead of a network of sources. At least me and my colleagues and the community of investigative journalists that are doing good work they use more and more this network of resources, and I mean by that the databases and tools to work with data. Instead of this traditional network of sources that, at least in our region, was so corrupt and really controlled. So that was one of our main problems that we had to deal with, the information control. There was no community of journalists back then, of journalists who do investigative work. Now there is a global network of investigative journalists. A big problem was the censorship, so we had to create an online platform to publish our story. This is our website. Oh, sorry. The area we are covering, it's Black Sea region, the Balkans, and strangely enough, we are part of the EU since 2007. We had to create management system for documents on our own for our members 4 or 5 years ago. So I was talking about no data access, and international databases were a really big help for us because a lot of information we couldn't find back home, we could cross-check through international databases. We used a strategy of creating tools, and we kind of behaved like a vacuum cleaner for databases. Wherever we went in the region, we collected databases, and databases in Eastern Europe are a lot. Although people think they are not, they don't know where to look for them. A lot of databases in Eastern Europe are also on the black market, sold illegally, are in various formats. So we had to collect all these wide range of databases and aggregate them in building our own big database. We also look into creating these online tools available for everybody. So this is just an example. It's called the Media Index. It's a database by regions and cities where we started doing this in 2006, where you can see all the media owners in Romania and what other businesses they have, who are their business associates, and where do they make money from. We were feeding watchdog NGOs with data. We created this database on organized crime. We call it People of Interest, where you can search by country, name, sort of top of organized crime groups. I was talking about experimenting with publishing, so we were working in team with freelance photographers to build different reporting projects. And I was saying that at the beginning we had no community of journalists, and we really felt that lack of community. And now there are, in the last 7 years, there are various communities of investigative journalists, and I think that's very important. One of these, it's called Scoop. It's a supporting structure for investigative journalists in Eastern Europe. And out of Scoop, it grew also this global investigative journalist network that will have a global conference in Kiev, Ukraine, in mid-October. And I really think that this kind of community that it's building here with this type of conference, it would be very interesting to sometime work together and join this community of investigative journalists internationally. We also created a network of reporters reporting on organized crime and corruption in Eastern Europe. And we also experimented with crowdsourcing. Here it's a website of a project we done with MIT Media Lab. We got the surveillance footage, the CCTV footage from during the riots 2 years ago in Chisinau, capital of Republic of Moldova. During those riots, students were beaten, arrested, and some of them killed. And we got the secret filming of the government of those riots, but we didn't know how to use them. So we built this platform and put the video. The video was still secret 1.5 years after the event. So we put all the video footages online, and we created a space for people to recognize perpetrators, or to recognize top people from the police or the Secret Service who were involved in beating the students. But I must say, like you were saying, without somebody to add context and curate this, it didn't work. It didn't work because we had no capacity to somehow put more information online and deal with the people who are consulting this website. It worked in only one way, that this footage is used as an evidence in court by the families of the students who got killed in Chisinau. So, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So the problems that we had a few years ago, we dealt with using digital tools and internet. The problems that we have now, it's that we have a lot of non-relevant and non-verifiable information online, and that's the problem we want to deal with, because this is what we want to create, and this is what I think would be the future. Sort of communities not intermediated by anybody, not intermediated by gatekeepers, who jointly operate. It would be a jointly operation of producers and consumers of verifiable and relevant information. The only thing we have to deal with is to find a business model, we as a non-profit, to do that. Because we have all these wonderful tools, but we don't have the resources. We have the people who could do this work, but we don't have the resources to deal with a lot of data. And we don't have the impact platforms to do this. And the consequences are, there are a lot of stories flying around us. Your money is really spent in a terrible way in Eastern Europe, or in places like Kosovo, or also in remote places like African countries. And nobody does stories about that, because we don't have the capacity to do this. Power is not challenged. A lot of abuses occur from government, but also from corporations. So, yeah, I think that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks.